Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you Tuesday, November 5th. What is up, everybody? I know everyone in the nation right now, as I record, is gathered around their television, their smartphones, all their devices in which they consume podcasts, and they're like, where's Nick? Where's Word with Wallace? The NBA season started 2 weeks ago. What's the deal? We've only got one episode and it was previewing the season. What the hell is going on? I'll tell you what's going on. And for those that are on YouTube, can probably already tell, we got a little bit of a new studio going on. New stew, as you can tell, we did move, which kept me quite occupied the past couple weekends. I've been dialed in a little bit on the NBA, not as much as I'd like. But that's why we're here today. We got to get caught up. We have a sample size of 2 weeks of NBA games. A lot of trends going on, right? And so the whole point of this episode is going to be buy or sell. And we're going to be identifying all the early trends of this 2024-2025 NBA season. If I am buying the trend, I think it is going to continue. If I am selling the trend, then that means I think that we are going to expect different results moving forwards. We did have all 30 teams in the NBA play yesterday. There were 15 games. It was awesome. They actually staggered the start times of every game by like 10 or 15 minutes. That way you could just kind of flick, if you have League Pass, flick between games and actually see like concurrent ending, like game after game after game. So I really was only able to watch like the fourth quarters of all the games since they were all happening simultaneously. But it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. I know in the past when the NBA has had a slate of like 10 or more games, sometimes half of the games start at the same time and there's like no possible way to follow all of them simultaneously. But they fixed it. So I thought that was great. Really enjoyed that. And yeah, for some reason, no games on today on, again, Tuesday, November 5th. Can't think of what else is going on besides people like myself using this time to talk about the NBA season with the lack of games on. So anyways, let's get right into it. Again, if my sound quality is off a little bit, it is because we are in a new studio. I haven't finished setting up all the sound panels and everything like that. I did want to get you guys this episode today. So let's get into it. Let's get into buy or sell, talking about all these early NBA season trends. And I think we have to start off with the Milwaukee Bucks. What the hell is going on in Milwaukee? They were my pick to be the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, and it has been far from that. Looks like that might be a little bit lofty of a goal for the Milwaukee Bucks, because right now they are 1-6 and are tied for the worst record in the NBA. So there's a couple different things the Bucks can do from here. Some people are actually out there calling for the Bucks to just blow it all up because it doesn't look like the supporting cast around Dame and Giannis is going to amount in a contending team, and that they could still get a huge haul for especially Giannis, obviously Dame as well. They also have the option of firing Doc Rivers as well. So as far as a buy or sell perspective, I am going to, first of all, sell the blow it up Bucks. I think that as alarming as it's been to start the season for the Bucks, I think there is obviously plenty of time for them to turn it around. Again, I think the 2 seed in the East is probably pretty unlikely at this point, but I still think they could even be like a top 4, at least a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. And here's why. I think no Giannis last game, first of all. The last couple games they've played against the red-hot Cleveland Cavaliers, who we're going to talk more about in a second. Both games were extremely close, decided by single digits. And in the second of the 2 games, they didn't have Giannis. They haven't had Chris Middleton all season long. And Dame and Giannis look really good. I think that's the most important part. That obviously Dame, I think he had like a single-digit point night where he looked particularly awful about a week ago at this point. And a lot of people were, making fun of Dame, and rightfully so, because he's definitely not at that like last level of consistency that you'd expect from a player as talented as Dame. Just because he is a little bit of an older guard, he doesn't necessarily have it every single night. But most nights he's been pretty awesome for the Bucks, and he was in like a real duel with Darius Garland last night, a game that went down to the wire and was super exciting to watch. And so I think Dame has it. Obviously, Giannis still has it. He's a monster, still averaging like his 30, 10, and 7 or whatever he's averaging, right? He's a monster. And really, the East is pretty bad overall. There's actually only 2 teams in the East with above 500 records, and that is the Cavs and the Celtics. Everybody else is 500 or below. And so it's not going to take much. It's just going to take for the Bucks to string together a couple of wins, and they're going to be right there as like a top 5 seed in the conference. So obviously, no, when the Bucks have a top 3 player in the world, hands down, in Giannis, they absolutely should not blow it up. However, the tricky thing for the Bucks is that they just like don't have a lot of moves that they can make. And that's why I'm actually buying the firing of Doc Rivers, because he's got about like a week at this point, maybe even a little bit less. Like if they get to like 1-8, I think 1-9 is like an absolute death sentence for Doc. Like you have to make a move, because there really isn't anything that they can do with the supporting cast. Like, they already worked around the margins in the offseason, in which I said they did a pretty good job of getting guys like Taurean Prince, who's playing big minutes, getting guys like DeLon Wright, getting guys like Gary Trent. It even looks like AJ Green and Jackson can contribute at a pretty high level. So I think that the Bucks, like, as far as the supporting cast, there's not like an obvious move. There's not like an obvious roster change that they can make. Like, all their players are getting older pretty rapidly at this point, or at least the vast majority of them. And so there's not going to be any like a buyer's market for a guy like Taurean Prince or DeLon Wright or Brook Lopez or anything like that. I think it's be mostly contending teams that would be looking to add those type of players. So really the only move you can make is Doc Rivers, right? They made the decision to move on from Adrian Griffin, like 30 games in, 35 games into last season, which was pretty controversial since I think at that point the Bucks were like the 2 or the 3 seed in the East back then as well. And it's kind of hilarious because the numbers, when you look at Adrian Griffin, at least just like the win-loss record between him and Doc Rivers, it's really bad. Like, Adrian Griffin's winning percentage was way better than Doc's was at this point. And so I understand guys like Doc. It's been told that he knows how to manage superstars. I'm sure Dame and Giannis are pretty happy with them. But strategically, it just doesn't look like the Bucks are doing anything special. It looks very your turn, my turn between Dame and Giannis. And so I do think if there's any change that the Bucks can make, they need somebody to blame. And they can't really blame their supporting cast. They can't really change that. So it wouldn't surprise me if Doc Rivers is fired within the next like week or two. Like, it really could be that soon. But I definitely think that I sell the idea of blowing up the Bucks. I think overall they're going to be just fine. I did have an inside scoop from my ESPN Milwaukee insider, who is a diehard Bucks fan. He did say the Bucks were like a 4 out of 10 on the panic meter, so he's not too concerned about it. I do think he's a pretty passionate fan, so you probably have to like smack on about 3 more points, maybe bump that up to like a 7 to get like an unbiased perspective of the Bucks panic. But I do think there's some reasons for optimism in Milwaukee still. Let's keep it in the same Eastern Conference Central Division, and let's move on to a much more exciting team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers are arguably the hottest team in basketball, right there with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're 8-0. And the question that I want to ask is, are the Cavs contenders 2 weeks into the season? And I'm buying the idea of the Cavs being contenders, and here's why. I think most importantly, when you look at the change from last season, like roster-wise, they're basically the same, right? Really the only tangible change they made in the offseason was going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson at head coach. And whether that's 100% of the reason or at least just part of the reason, it looks like they are getting way more from Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and even Jarrett Allen, too. A little bit more advanced offensive production from Jarrett Allen. Like, those 3 guys are really awesome players who on other teams might even be like the 3 best players on a team, but because the Cleveland Cavaliers also locked up Donovan Mitchell to a long-term extension, it seemed like for large parts of the season last year, all 3 of those guys at times were kind of afterthoughts offensively, especially Darius Garland, who broke his jaw during the season, just never really seemed to get in a good rhythm for the Cavs, and he has been a monster so far, including again last night where he looked like he was the best player on the Cavs, and Donovan Mitchell was out there as well, but Garland's an incredible shooter. He's going to bounce back and shoot way better from 3 this season than he did last year. I think Evan Mobley, I was really high on him before last season and was pretty frustrated with just like the lack of offensive growth that we saw from him. And I thought they were going to have to move on from Jarrett Allen to kind of open things up for him a little bit more as like a center. But that being said, they stuck to their guns. They have both those guys out there. Mobley looks a lot more aggressive with the ball. Jarrett Allen is finishing at a really high level. And they're just a loaded team. Like, they have decent depth as well. They play really hard. They have a younger cast of guys. And I don't really expect this to change at all. Like, I had the Cavs as a 3 seed in the East, but even this, like, there's no way that, like, barring some sort of crazy injury, obviously there's a ton of season left, but it's really unlikely at this point that Milwaukee's actually going to finish above Cleveland and win that division. So I'm absolutely buying the Cavs as a contender, especially with how rough the rest of the East has looked. I think there's no reason to believe that the Cavs won't finish as like a top 2 or 3 seed in the Eastern Conference and have a real chance at making a run at it. All right, allow me to be a homer for a little bit here because I do want to give you guys a trifecta of Celtics takes that I'm buying or I'm selling. All right, let's go through the list. Let's start with Jason Tatum, who as of like 2 days ago was the front runner to be the 2024-2025 NBA MVP. So first question, MVP Tatum. Am I buying or selling? I'm selling Tatum as the MVP. Not because I don't think he is deserving of the award or whatever. Again, this is way too early to really be talking about it, but I would not recommend betting Jason Tatum for NBA MVP because I just don't think it's happening. Like, I think, again, the rest of the Celtics team is just so loaded. And because this ends up being such a narrative award, especially super late in the season, like, yes, it's possible the Celtics are the best team in basketball, and he keeps up with his current pace of averaging like career highs basically across the board. And that would be awesome. And I feel like Tatum definitely got over the hill after winning the title and all that stuff. But I don't know, maybe I'm just like too defensive and I'm too close to the vest here, but I just feel like people don't really think of Tatum in that upper echelon of NBA stars. I just think it would take a lot. It would take maybe an injury to somebody else in the Celtics for people to really recognize the work that Tatum did, because I think the narrative around him is just like, hey, he is probably the best player on that team, but the rest of the cast is so loaded, and that's why they're going to win 60-plus games again in all likelihood, right? So as much as I love Tatum, I love to see him as a leader for that type of award. Definitely selling the idea of him as MVP. However, I am 100% buying the new jump shot from Jason Tatum. That thing is looking crispy. I can't believe that everyone in the offseason was kind of right. People were suggesting they had changed his shot. I got a little annoyed with it. I felt like there wasn't like a really big difference between the clips I was seeing online. But then just from like night one, opening night against the Knicks, like he is just gunning from three. The first play of the season ends up being a Jason Tatum three on the first possession, and the Celtics end up tying the NBA record for most threes in a game. The jumper looks magnificent. It looks faster. It looks like his release point is a little bit higher. He's definitely taking and making shots with a lot more confidence. So I love to see that. And that's why I do think it's possible for Tatum to actually increase his career scoring after it went down a bit last year, just because his role changed a little bit. So I'm buying that. And then finally, I heard a lot of takes out there, and I don't know if the exact take came from Nick Wright going on this long diatribe I saw on Twitter about kind of stemming from the fact that the Celtics were ruining basketball. He didn't 100% mention the Celtics and call them out as like the cause of all this, but basically Nick Wright from Fox Sports was suggesting that because the NBA is heading in a direction of copying the Celtics and everybody taking threes, that he just doesn't enjoy the television product with how many teams are consistently shooting 30, 40 plus threes per game, right? He doesn't think it's a very enjoyable TV product, and therefore it stems from the Celtics, who just won the title with that strategy, that the Celtics are ruining basketball. And I'm going to sell that idea. Let me say that first and foremost, even though I kind of, paraphrased that a little bit. That wasn't exactly the take. But I do think it's important to remember that, like, everybody chucking threes, I know it can be boring to some, right? Like, I think the idea of everybody just like looking for an open three and then just trading baskets, and whatever team makes more threes that night ends up winning the game. Like, I understand how that's a frustrating concept to some, but I don't think people understand the effects of what happens when not everybody can shoot the ball, or at least 4 or 5 guys on the court can shoot the ball. Because this offseason, I can't pretend I did this every night, but when I was really hurting for like a lack of basketball content, I would like throw on like an old game that I could find on YouTube of like players I didn't get to watch, or it's been 20 something years since I've watched them. Now, I was mainly focusing on like the Larry Bird era because I was curious and I never got a chance to really watch Larry Bird, obviously outside of like YouTube highlights. But like, goddamn, I know that that is an extreme and we're never going back to that. But the spacing on the court in these old games, like even going back like 10, 12 years ago, it is like night and day compared to what it is now. And even when you get bored by the threes and everything like that, there's still many different like transition plays during the game, or opportunities where somebody just breaks somebody down in the perimeter and just attacks the basket. Like, I know this is a unique example because Ja's a particularly exciting player, but like Ja Morant doing 2 different 360 lays in the game against the Nets last night was unbelievable to watch. Like, those type of plays don't happen when you have a non-shooting 5 and a non-shooting 4 on the court at the same time, right? And then there's just a big man glued to the rim or something like that. Like, those exciting plays where the lane opens up and the center has to like scramble over for help, that's when you get the big posters. That's when you get the incredible like athleticism to maneuver around somebody going to the rim and scoring. Like, when everybody is jam-packed into the paint, like the brand of basketball becomes so boring, and like the shots that people are taking are so hideous that, like, yes, I understand that shooting threes back and forth and it can get very boring, but you need that spacing and you need that threat of having 3-point shooters out there to open up the exciting parts of the game that objectively everybody likes seeing: poster dunks. Everybody likes seeing big time blocks at the rim. Everybody likes seeing guys put their head down, break somebody down off the dribble, and getting to a tough shot around the basket. Like, that's what everyone loves, and you don't get that as often unless you are taking those 40-something threes. So you got to take it as what it was. Last time I checked, it was very exciting when Steph Curry reinvented the game of basketball with his outside shooting like 10 years ago at this point in time. So I did just want to say I don't think the Celtics are ruining basketball. I don't think they even created a new trend that people weren't already aware of with them going out and winning the title and committing to this Missoula ball style of shooting a bunch of three-pointers. I think that we're going to see more of the same, and it's still a really great television product for those that actually enjoy watching the game. Moving on to the next take that we either have to buy or we have to sell is the bounce back Warriors. Right now, the Warriors are 6-1. I believe they are tied for the second seed in the Western Conference. A lot of people are saying the Warriors are back. Have they bounced back? Are they a real contender? Am I buying or selling the bounce back Warriors? And I'm actually going to sell this team. I would love to be wrong. I love Steph Curry. He's my favorite player of all time. I know he's missed a couple of these games early, but when I look at the 6-1 Warriors, I've only got to watch like one full game of theirs. I will say that I think their record is mainly just due to a really easy strength of schedule to start the season. Just to run through it, they have beaten the Blazers, the Jazz, the Pelicans 2 different times, which again, they're really banged up. No Herb Jones, no Trey Murphy, all that stuff. They've lost to the Rockets, and then they... Just to run through it, they've beat the Blazers, the Jazz, the Pelicans 2 different times. I know they're banged up with a bunch of different injuries. The Rockets and the Wizards. And then their only loss came to the Clippers. So they've had an absolute Mickey Mouse cupcake schedule to start the year, which again, all the power to the Warriors for actually going out and winning 6 of their first 7 games. Like, that's obviously a great start. Draymond's shooting like over 50% from 3, so good for him. I know he shot the ball really well from 3 last year as well, so that'd be nice to actually consider him a threat from the outside. But I still don't love the guys that they brought in the offseason. I think that Buddy Hield, I know he's been shooting the ball really well and scoring the ball at a good clip, and Lindy Waters has been like a nice little pickup from OKC, but I still think the same problems that have existed with the Warriors since they obviously won the 2022 title. I just don't think that they are actually have the talent to compete with other teams in the West. They still really haven't gotten that leap from Kuminga, at least yet. I think that's really the only way that this team ascends into a team that can actually contend for a top 5 seed in the West is if one of their young guys like truly makes a leap into like stardom is really the only way that this team is able to accomplish their goals. So I know that they're 6-1. I definitely think the Warriors could be like a play-in team or, maybe sneak in as like a playoff team as a 6th seed, but I really do not see a world in which the Warriors are able to stay atop this loaded Western Conference and keep up their current pace of being 6-1. The next team we have to talk about, believe it or not, the Brooklyn Nets. And the take here that we're either buying or selling is, do the Brooklyn Nets have a top 5 backcourt in the NBA? Now, before you laugh at me, it's probably already too late. Let's just go through the stats. Right now, the Nets are 4-4. Okay, that's better than people expected. And they have a couple good wins. They've beat the Bucks. They've beat Memphis on back-to-back games. And they nearly beat the Denver Nuggets in OT. Like, they've been a really solid team. And their backcourt of Cam Thomas and Dennis Schroeder are averaging 25 and 20 points per game, respectively. Obviously, we have to sell. The Nets are not a top 5 backcourt in the NBA. But shout out my guy Ty for bringing that up, because it was hilarious that you can make an argument. You can make an argument just by looking at the stats. That's how good the Nets have been this year. I don't really understand it. The Cam Thomas thing, I somewhat understand, because you knew he was going to be penciled in for like 30 shots a game. That's like just kind of what he averages when he gets a full workload, and he's really the only talented scorer that the team has, so it makes sense he'd have the green light. But when you pair that with Dennis Schroeder, who obviously, usually plays well in overseas ball and FIBA ball and everything like that, but for him to just like come in and immediately average like 20-something points per game and look pretty fantastic on both ends of the court, like, I just have to show some respect to the Nets. I wanted to find a cheesy way to work them into this. Obviously, they're not a top 5 backcourt. For the sake of this exercise, I will give you my top 5 backcourts in the NBA in no order. Dallas Mavericks have to be up there. The Celtics have to be up there. The Cavs, especially after their hot start. The Thunder and the Knicks would be my choice for your top 5 backcourts in the NBA. But I just wanted to mention the Nets. The Nets are on notice, right? Like, Cam Thomas and Dennis Schroeder are hooping. I expect that record to fall off a little bit, but they have been pretty fun to watch so far. The next take we have to buy or sell is Analytics Ant-Man. Analytics Anthony Edwards. There's been a big shift in his game this year for those that have watched the Timberwolves closely. Anthony Edwards, over the first, 4 years of his career, was averaging usually between like 6 and 8 attempts from 3 per game, right? So not exactly a high volume 3-point shooter, but obviously he can shoot it. Always shot it at a decent clip. That has now jumped up to over 11 3-point attempts per game in this very young season. And just by watching the tape, it stands out more than you'd think. It looks like he's going to step back jumpers and pull up 3-point jumpers a lot more consistently, especially early in the games, compared to what we've seen from Anthony Edwards in the past. He's making 45% from three this season. And so I'm buying it. I am buying analytics Ant-Man. I think that this is going to be overall a positive trend for Anthony Edwards. I'm sure there must have been some people on the Minnesota coaching staff that sat him down this offseason, was like, hey, look, man, you're a pretty talented three-point shooter. We think if we bump up that volume, you're going to maintain your percentages. We think it's going to open up the rest of your game. And if Anthony Edwards can get into rhythm, especially early in the game, and knock down a couple three-point shots, like, the jumper looks great. Like, it looks fantastic, obviously, because he's such a dominant athlete. Like, he just seems like he jumps extra high in his jumpers. It seems like he gets to, like, peak elevation way smoother and easier than nearly anybody else in the NBA. And so if he's drilling a couple outside shots early on, like, those defenders that already have no chance in staying in front of a guy that athletic are going to have to come out on him that much further, close out on him that much harder, double him off of screens. And if they don't, he's just going to get to the rim at will. And then we're going to get all those crazy plays that we love watching Anthony Edwards for. So I'm all in on it. The jumper looks good. He's shooting the shots that are in rhythm. Sure, you could make the argument, hey, we want him going to the basket more because he's such a good athlete. But if he is shooting 40+% from three, I know 45 is not sustainable, but if he can just be like 38, 39, maybe even 40% from three, like, holy crap, that's going to open things up for him, especially in the second half of games. And I'm here for it. I think this could be the year that Anthony Edwards ascends from like 26 points a game to 29, even 30 points a game if he's able to maintain this high volume shooting and the percentages he's currently putting up. All right, next take I got for you. Stretch 5 Wemby. There's been a lot of dialogue going on about just watching the first couple Spurs games of the year and just how many three-point shots that Victor Wembanyama is taking. So last year, just to remind you guys, he averaged out to 5.5 three-point attempts per game. He shot 33% from three last year, so not great, but he did make enough where you could warrant shooting at least a couple threes a game. But this year, it's gone up to over 7 attempts per game, and he's only averaging 22% from three this year. So on the take, going back to should Wemby be a stretch 5, I'm actually going to sell that idea. I don't like it. I don't think he should stick to it, and here's why. Obviously, he is talented enough to take a wide open three-point shot, right? If he's going to occasionally pick and, pop, for example, if he's able to just kind of space out in the corner or flare to the corner and, have an action to get him wide open for three if teams are really sagging off of him, I think it's totally fine for him to shoot those shots. But the idea of him this early in his career to like be taking three-point shots off the dribble, to be taking pull-up three-point shots, to be taking transition three-point shots, all things I've seen Wemby do, it's just not a good shot for him right now. It's not. So for right now, I am selling the idea of him taking this many three-point shots. Maybe I'm not selling the idea of him being a stretch 5. Obviously, he can be that. He will be that. He kind of already is that. But I don't like how many three-point shots he's taking. It's just how out of rhythm it looks. I know there's a lot of things about Wemby when he has the ball in his hands that are really awkward, but for right now, I think San Antonio needs to do a better job of getting him more in rhythm. It's really the exact opposite of that Anthony Edwards argument we just talked about. He doesn't, like, Victor Wembanyama doesn't need to get defenses to commit from him, 20, 30 feet from the basket. Like, they don't need to do that. He can dominate a defense without having that pressure applied to him that far away from the basket because he's 7'4". If he catches the ball within the vicinity of the basket, it's going to be a bucket on nearly anybody in the NBA. So I think that San Antonio, Chris Paul, Greg Popovich, whoever, needs to do a better job of getting Victor Wembanyama more easy shots around the basket, especially early in the game. Like, get him into a rhythm early on, show him how easily he can dominate a game instead of just giving him the ball 20-something feet from the basket and asking him to do something. Because I think that's where a lot of these three-point attempts stem from. It's like, hey, Wemby, here's the ball, do something. And he just ends up settling for a jumper because he's tired, because he's asked to do a lot in the defensive end, because he doesn't want to put forth the effort to just, bang somebody or blow by somebody to actually get to a shot in the lane or something like that. So I just think San Antonio needs to treat him a little bit more like a center and then just watch how those numbers explode. Let the rest of the things come naturally. I'm not saying he shouldn't be able to create. I'm not saying he can't look to get a jump shot every once in a while, but I think it's just more like, let's scheme open ideas to get him wide open shots at the rim, get him going early on, and the three-point shots will come throughout the game. And if he's wide open, definitely let it fly. He's a talented enough shooter. But the idea of a 7'4" guy this early in his career shooting 7 threes a game when he's only making 22%, I can't buy that. Now let's talk about a team that I'm really high on, the Houston Rockets. But a lot of people out there are saying that Houston has a problem. And we got to figure out if we're buying or selling that problem. Now, Houston is 4-3. They were my pick to be the 6 or 7 seed in the Western Conference. I'm really high on the Rockets. They're 4-3. They look really good. But their problem is they have 10 guys who either need or deserve real minutes. I know it's not good podcasting for me to just like read to you the Houston Rockets roster, but I need you to understand what I'm talking about when I say 10 guys. They have Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, Fred VanVleet, Tari Eason, Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, Cam Whitmore, and most recently the number 3rd overall pick in this past NBA draft, Reed Sheppard. Those are 10 guys that should be getting at least 20 to 30, maybe even 35 minutes a game, depending on the guys in that list. I think the Rockets are that talented. But the issue is they simply have too many guys. And in addition to those 10 guys, they also have Aaron Holiday, who Ime Udoka likes to go to at end-of-game defensive situations. They have Jock Landale, a guy that they got from Phoenix, who's a pretty nice stretch 5. Jae'Sean Tate, and the ageless wonder Jeff Green, right? So there's a lot of guys that could play real rotation minutes in Houston. And I'm actually going to buy the idea that I think it's a problem for the Rockets long term. I think it's going to be something that's really difficult to overcome, even for a coach I have a lot of belief in Ime Udoka. I think that even though the Rockets are 4-3, it's just going to be really difficult to manage that many personalities throughout the season. Like, Sengun is a bona fide star who went out there and just absolutely daddied Karl-Anthony Towns last night. Like, Towns had no answer. He dominated the Knicks all night long. He had like 28 and like 15 and 5 and like 4 blocks. He was unbelievable on both ends of the court. Like, Sengun looked awesome. And there's other games in the season where he's not even closing the game. He's not even closing the game for them. They opt to go with like Tari Eason or Jabari Smith at the 5 with Amen Thompson playing like a quasi 4. And that's great that they have the options to pivot to other lineups depending on the matchup. But it's got to be difficult for a guy in Sengun. And I know I'm a little biased because I love Sengun. He's on my fantasy team. Like, that's my guy. But that being said, like, he has to feel like a bona fide star in the NBA because the numbers say that he is. The eye test says that he is. But then he's just like not out there at the end of a game, like for the final 4 or 5 minutes, just because like it doesn't really fit the matchup. Like, I don't think the Rockets are good enough to have to worry about that. Like, maybe in the playoffs and whatever, that's great. But in the regular season, I think there's more positive things to be said about the teams that know who their 5 are, that know who they are on any given night. They know the guys that they're going to go out there and fight with. And the Rockets don't have that. And they're not going to have that until they actually make a 2-for-1 trade or a 3-for-1 trade to a team that's in need of depth. I don't know exactly what that trade is. Maybe I'll get out the trade machine for the next episode. But I just think that there's way too many guys in the Rockets. It's hard to get a rhythm, not just for Sengun, but like Cam Whitmore, for example, only averaging 11 minutes a game this season after being a lottery pick last year, looking really promising. He didn't even play last night. He was a DNP against the Knicks. Reed Sheppard, a guy that was my pick for Rookie of the Year, not feeling great about that because he's averaging 9 minutes a game. He looks fine when he's out there. It's not like we've really had a sample size that's large enough to evaluate, but I do think it is a problem in Houston. I think that even with a really disciplined head coach, it's just going to be so hard to get those guys to buy in and fight. And it seems like a guy like Ime Udoka is always going to gravitate toward defense. He's going to gravitate toward guys like Amen Thompson and Tari Eason because he loves their defense. He loves their energy. It's hard to keep guys like that off the court, but you're paying the price of not developing guys like Jabari Smith, Reed Sheppard, Cam Whitmore, depending on the matchup. So I think Houston will be great, a great team this year. I think they'll be at like a top 6 or 7 seed in the conference either way, but I think they would really benefit from trading away a couple of those guys. Whoever those guys are, you guys can let me know if you're Rockets fans or whatever. But they need to make a 3-for-1 or a 2-for-1 to get a little bit more balance and get the guys the minutes that they deserve. Moving on to the next take we have to buy or sell. Let's move things over to Philadelphia. We have to talk about a team that is lucky that the Milwaukee Bucks exist because otherwise the Philadelphia 76ers would be dead last in the entire Eastern Conference. They're 1-5. Again, the only team with the worst record is the Bucks. And the take we have to buy or sell is, are the Sixers cooked? Are they already cooked? Is the season already a wash? Let's talk about it because Joel Embiid has not played. There was some misinformation going around out there in regards to his availability, in regards to his strategy for the season. Talks about how he just wanted to take, prioritizing his health, maintaining his body a little bit more serious during the regular season, how he wouldn't be playing in the second half of back-to-backs, that he was really going to invest in load management so he'd be ready and healthy and in shape for the playoffs. Really, that's just like a bunch of BS that was coming out of Joel Embiid's camp and the Sixers camp because Embiid just isn't healthy to start the year. He's not healthy. He's dealing with some sort of knee injury, I believe. And on top of that, to make matters worse, he's actually just been suspended as of earlier today for at least 3 games for shoving a reporter. Apparently there was some controversy around that, and there's some people out there that argued the reporter definitely deserved it, which I'm not going to rule that out based on some of the things I've heard, but until anything is confirmed, I'm not going to really speak on that too much. I do wish we had some video evidence to see exactly how bad this shove was, But regardless, the verdict is that Joel Embiid has been suspended for an additional 3 games. Not sure when that goes into place, considering he hasn't actually played in a game this season. So maybe it doesn't really make all that much of a difference if he wasn't going to be ready to play till next week anyways. But regardless, the vibes in Philadelphia are really bad. You've only seen 1 game from Paul George, which was last night, in which he got the ball at the end of a close game against the Suns. Paul George did look a little bit rusty, but they went to him with the game on the line. Probably should have gone to Tyrese Maxey because Paul George ended up missing the shot. But overall, you got a wide open look from Paul George, so I'm not going to beat him up too bad. But it's rough. It's really tough to be getting out to a 1-5 start when you have so much hype and excitement around the offseason, getting the big splashy name in Paul George, working around the fringes to get a guy like Caleb Martin. Are the Sixers cooked? I'm selling that idea. I think the Sixers ultimately are going to be just fine, very similar to the Bucks. The argument is basically the same. Like, they haven't had all their guys out there. Eventually, Joel Embiid will play. Even if he only plays in like 50 games in the regular season, he can be a dominant force. He's going to get his 30-plus points a game. He's going to be an absolute matchup nightmare out there. I think once Paul George really settles into being a glorified number 3 option for the team, I think ultimately he's going to be the one that has to make the most sacrifices, given, Philly is pretty homegrown with Maxey and Embiid at this point in time. They're still, like, especially with Maxey, is really trending upwards at this point. Paul George is probably over the hill a little bit. I think all their pieces make a lot of sense, and especially given how weak the rest of the Eastern Conference is, like, none of the teams outside of the top few have impressed, so I think the Sixers are going to be just fine. Next take we have to buy or sell is JJ Redick as Coach of the Year. Now, this would have had a lot more momentum if I actually got out a podcast last week when the Lakers started like 3-0 or 4-0 or something like that. At this point in time, they're 4-3, but overall they look a lot better on offense. I must give JJ Redick a lot of credit. AD looks like a literal MVP candidate and a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. He's averaging over 30 points a game. Austin Reeves has been incredible. Just their offense as a whole. Like, they're moving the ball around a lot better. It seems like they're going to a lot more consistent action and themes that are getting guys open. It's not just stagnant, stand around, wait for LeBron or AD to create something off the dribble or something like that. It doesn't look like that at all. Just a lot more motion with the offense. They're getting their shooters a lot of open looks, albeit they don't have a lot of great shooters. Rui Hachimura started the season on fire. But overall, I do have to sell the idea of JJ Redick winning Coach of the Year. It's just going to be hard for the Lakers to maintain a really great record in a loaded Western Conference, given that they have an older team and they have a lot of issues on the bench. I think if there could be easily a lot of momentum for JJ because he's such a notable personality. People are, very familiar with JJ Redick after his illustrious college career, pro career, the podcasting, all that stuff. Everybody knows who JJ Redick is. So if the Lakers are a really good team, he'll definitely have a shot at it. But I just can't see the Lakers, without changing the core that radically from last season. They really have no changes at all besides the addition of Dalton Knecht, who's been pretty solid so far, the rookie out of Tennessee. It's just going to be hard for them to stay afloat in the West as an older team with not a lot of depth. Like, their bench right now is pretty brutal. I really like Gabe Vincent. I know how awesome he was against the Celtics in that series in 2023 when the Heat made that finals run, but Gabe Vincent's a small guard. He's on the older side now. He was banged up a ton last season, and I just don't know if we're ever going to get that same version of 2023 Gabe Vincent ever again. So be kind of sad if that was the case, but until he bounces back. Jared Vanderbilt has just been hurt for like 3 years now. I love Jared Vanderbilt when he's healthy, but you need him to get healthy. Like, Jackson Hayes has always been really frustrating. So over time, like, they've gradually lost 1 or 2 guys on their bench each year for the Lakers. And so that's why I'm selling the idea of JJ Redick. Even if this offense makes Anthony Davis look a lot better and some of their ancillary pieces a lot better, it's going to take a lot for the Lakers to have JJ Redick win Coach of the Year. I just don't think the Lakers record is going to support that. And then finally, the last take we have to talk about. I wanted to throw this one in at the end. League Pass announcers. Am I buying them? Am I selling them? How are we feeling? 2 weeks back on League Pass, clicking around all the games. I'm absolutely selling the home team announcers on League Pass. I can't deal with it. I'm going to come out and say it. I just have to give you a few examples of some of the takes that I've heard. Literally just a few, because I haven't watched as much basketball as I wanted with the move. But the Pistons game the other night, they were playing the Lakers. The Lakers actually ended up losing that game to the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons have been a lot better. The middle of the game, there's some sort of skirmish between Cam Reddish and Tim Hardaway Jr., right? Cam Reddish definitely plays with more of an edge to him. That's kind of what he contributes on this Lakers team. But the Pistons announcers on the home broadcast are just kind of talking shit, kind of sneak dissing Cam Reddish. And then finally he gets into this little skirmish with Tim Hardaway Jr. And one of the announcers is like, man, I don't exactly know who would win in a fight here. And then the other guy chimes in and was like, Cam Reddish would not win in a fight, and he would certainly not win in a contest of who's a better basketball player between him and Tim Hardaway Jr. And I'm like, give me a break. First of all, Tim Hardaway Jr. is mega washed He's washed up. We watched him in Dallas last year. The brother is terrible. Now, maybe I'm just like defending Cam Reddish a little bit because I like him. He went to Duke, and I kind of like what he's turned into for the Lakers and whatever. But like, you don't need to just be like glazing your own team, just saying like, "Yep, my guy's gonna win in a fight, and he's a better basketball player." Like, just drop it. It was corny. I know I did a bad job of it, like mentioning that story, but that's just one of the many like extreme biases that drive me nuts as an unbiased fan clicking around to these broadcasts. And then the other one that I wanted to mention that was just like hilarious is like, I literally flick on the Mavs game last night during the opening tip. They're playing what? I believe they played the Magic last night, if I'm not mistaken. Magic are missing like a lot of players and whatever, so there's no Paulo, which was a bummer because he started the year on fire. But that being said, the Mavs kind of took care of business. But we're talking like jump ball here, like second one of the game. Like, we're not looking at like a blowout situation in which the guys are just like rifting, going back and forth, trying to like just like fill some dead air. But like, one of the Mavs announcers just turns to the other one and he's like, and that's why I think Kyrie Irving is the best point guard in the NBA. Like, deadpan, just came out and said it like 1 second into the game. I'm like, Kyrie's never been the best point guard in the NBA. Definitely not now. Not to mention, he's not even the point guard on his own team. Like, you guys are the Mavs home broadcast. If you cannot recognize that Luka like leads the league in touches right there with Jokic and I guess this year James Harden and anybody else, like, then what do you even watch the games? Like, Kyrie is not a point guard. He's a combo guard. He's an off guard at this point in time. And even if he was a point guard, he's simply not the best. Like, what are we talking? It just, the fact that had to get brought up like 0 seconds into the game just shows you where we're at on most league pass announcers. Not all league pass announcers. I think, you got to tune into those Hornets games just to hear those psychopaths like freak out like, oh my God, like after every routine fast break for the Hornets. But anyways, a little sick of league pass announcers already, so had to mention that. So that's all I got for this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed this gimmick of buying and selling all the early season takes. Let's just run through and recap it, right? The first take we broke down. Should the Bucks blow it up? Nope, I'm selling the idea of the Bucks blowing it up, but I am buying the idea of firing Doc Rivers. The Cavs being contenders in the Eastern Conference, I am buying that idea. They look great. I think the East is very weak. MVP Jason Tatum, I'm selling that idea. I don't really see a world in which he ever gets that award. I'm buying his new jump shot form, and I'm selling the idea of the Celtics ruining basketball with their high frequency of three-pointers. I'm selling the bounce back Warriors. I just don't see it. I think their 6-1 start is a product of the schedule. I am selling the Nets as a top 5 backcourt in the NBA, despite the incredible early season performance from Cam Thomas and Dennis Schroeder. I am buying analytics Ant-Man Anthony Edwards and his increased volume of three-point shooting. I think that's going to make him a much more dynamic scorer overall. I'm selling the idea of Wemby as a stretch 5. I think he really needs to cut back on the three-point attempts, get him closer to the basket, get him going early and often around the basket in games. I'm buying the idea that the Rockets indeed have a problem. I think they have too many guys. They need to make a 2-for-1 trade or a 3-for-1 trade to help manage those personalities if they want to be a real playoff team this year. I'm selling the idea of the Sixers being cooked. I think they're going to be just fine, just like the Bucks. They just need a little bit more time, get their guys healthy. They'll be fine in a pretty weak Eastern Conference. I'm selling the idea of JJ Redick as coach of the year. I just don't think the Lakers record will maintain enough to the point where JJ has momentum for that award. And I am selling the idea of annoying, biased league pass announcers. So that is going to do it today for this podcast. Again, it's been a really fun NBA season. I'm so glad we're back. I cannot wait to provide more episodes of this podcast each and every week now that we're settled into the new studio. The move is complete. We should get right back on track to be watching League Pass most nights and bringing on some guests around the NBA to help me fill in on all the biggest storylines in the NBA. So before I let you guys go, again, thank you for listening to the third season of Words with Wallace, the third NBA season. I am having this feed to be a part of the NBA season. I'm really fired up for it. Be sure to follow @Words with Wallace on everything that includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to follow the show on social media @Words with Wallace on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.